Hello again, theory students. I'm here to talk about Thomas Hobbes and his philosophy in a rather large book called the Leviathan. Hobbes continues the tradition of Machiavelli of wanting to study politics on its own terms and wanting to continue to break with ancient philosophies, right? So Hobbes' starting point is very different from like Aristotle and Plato and others, just like it's different, like Machiavelli's is different. Hobbes goes further though. Machiavelli presumes government, right? So when you read Machiavelli, there's a presumption that government exists, right? It just exists. It's like almost as if government is natural, right? Plato and Aristotle, the ancients, and most thinkers in the Middle Ages, like Thomas Aquinas and others, the government is natural. Government always exists. Machiavelli, too, to a certain extent, doesn't disagree with that. Right? States always exist. Hobbes fundamentally disagrees with that. Right? Politics is unnatural for Hobbes. For Hobbes, our starting point is isolated, atomistic individuals who exist without community. They're isolated, they're scared. Politics is unnatural. It's external, right? Communities aren't natural, right? It's you versus everyone else. That's what Hobbes thinks our natural state is. It's a math problem, right? One versus everyone else. And the only escape is mathematical, right? In order to get rid of the one versus everyone else, we have to make it 0 on 0, which is how we end up with the social contract, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But Hobbes thinks that there is no greater good, greater goal for society. There's just, you need to do what you need to do in order to preserve your own life, right? That is what we do. Our goal in life is to preserve our life and to avoid, not all death, because we can't avoid all death, but we can avoid tragic death, right, or violent death, and unnatural death. Right? And Hobbes starts his work with what he calls the state of nature, right, the original state of being for people, he says. And in this state of nature, we are ruled by our passions, by our gut. We're not ruled by reason. Our desires are constantly moving. We are never at rest. We always seek to fulfill our desires, even at the expense of reason. We have reason. We just are led by our desires, Hobbes thinks. And so there's no morality in the state of nature. Good or bad is entirely subjective because it's based upon what my passions are at the moment. There's no good or bad. There's just what I choose to do in that moment that feels right for me. We can't get good or bad, right or wrong, until we enter society. Right? When we create a society, we set rules for right and wrong. That's when we get right and wrong, Hobbes thinks. But before that, it's just you and what you choose to do. And the state of nature is a terrible place, right? We fear loss, right? We fear death. That's our motivation to avoid it. And because of that, we're constantly trying to accumulate more to try and secure ourselves. And we fear our assurances that we can satisfy our desires. And so man does two things. He constantly is procuring things, and he wants to be secure in his possessions and his enjoyment of those possessions. And Hobbes says there is a perpetual and restless desire of power after power that ceaseth only in death. Right? We don't just desire to have goods, but we seek the power to have goods. And so these desires and conflicting desires between these individuals in the state of nature lead to competition and the elimination of a competition, right? Because the dead aren't competitors. You seek to kill others to secure your ability to procure things and be safe in that procurement, right? But this is bad, okay? This is a terrible situation, right? People fight because of competition. People fight because they mistrust each other, right, or misunderstand each other, right? Is that other person over there picking apples while I'm picking apples? Is he going to come kill me for my apples? Right? I don't know this person. I don't know what they're going to do, right? So maybe I need to kill them first, right? But we also fight for glory, right? I want to assert myself as the dominant person of the pack, right? The alpha in the state of nature. It says everyone is equal, right? Everyone is equal. One, because God made everyone equal, but two, because anyone has the capability of killing anyone else. The weak can kill the strong, because even the strong have to sleep. Right? And weapons level the playing field against weak and strong. Groups level the playing field against weak and strong. So we have a war of all against all, Hobbes says. The state of nature is a perpetual state of war and conflict. Right? We are always at the disposition to fight others because we seek to secure our own lives and properties. It's a terrible place. All we have is fear and danger of death. Life, Hobbes says, is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. There's no place for justice, no place for good and bad, just force and fraud. There's no private property either. There's just mine and thine, and they're mine and thine because I can get it and keep it, and you can get it and you can keep it. But if I can kill you, yours becomes mine. So there's no industry, there's no arts, there's no society, there's no commerce. Right? I promise to give you $5 and you give me a bushel of apples, you give me the bushel of apples, and I murder you. That's what life is like. And so how do we escape this? Well, our passions, right? Our desire for self-preservation leads us to realize that this state is untenable, right? I desire a comfortable life, and this is not the state of nature, is not the way to obtain that comfortable life. And so eventually my passions lead me to a rational thought, which is we ought to rid ourselves of this state of nature. We ought to give up our individual rights to kill each other, to determine right and wrong, and give them up to an all-powerful government, the Commonwealth, Hobbes says, right? We need to create a system that will preserve our lives because they're not secure in the state of nature. Okay? So Hobbes thinks we will naturally come to a conclusion that we need government. Okay? Our unhappy condition can only be eliminated through the creation of government. And what we do when we create government is we create a contract between us and the government, the sovereign, the Commonwealth. We agree to give all power and strength to one man. We agree that everything that the sovereign says, that the Commonwealth decides, is something we must be obliged to follow. Right? We give our wills, our free will, up to this individual who tells us what to do. We make the person who leads our Commonwealth our representative. And what Hobbes means here is not just that they're like representing, like we have representatives in government, but that their decisions are actually our decisions, right? Whenever the Commonwealth decides something, it's as though we decide to do that. And therefore we are obliged to follow it because we've given up our ability to argue with the sovereign. Okay? And we will always submit our will and judgment to his will and judgment. And this will unify us. Right? The Commonwealth becomes united in one person, the sovereign, the Leviathan. Okay? We all must unanimously agree that this happens. And if someone does not agree, then we will kill them until we have everyone in agreement. And the purpose here is peace and security. Okay? And Hobbes says very specifically that everything the sovereign does, everything the leader of our commonwealth does, is for the purposes of peace and security, no matter what the sovereign tells us to do. Therefore, we cannot disobey the sovereign, according to Hobbes. Also, the sovereign cannot actually injure us, right? Cannot actually cause harm to us, because everything the sovereign is doing is for the betterment of the community and the betterment of you. So if the sovereign decides you need to die, you are obliged to follow that, because apparently that is what is best for society and for you, according to the sovereign. And you must obey. You cannot disagree. If you disagree, you will also die. Okay? The reason Hobbes says we have to put all power into one person is because when you divide power, you end up with a fallen kingdom. Okay? So the power is indivisible and inalienable, and even though this may be inconvenient, even though there may be bad decisions, it's still better than the state of nature. Okay? And the sovereign will allow us to live in a state of liberty. Now, liberty for Hobbes does not mean what liberty in our minds is. For Hobbes, liberty literally means the absences of external stops to your motion. Right? So as long as you are unimpeded from doing what you will, then you are free. Right? So if I wish to walk from here to the door, across the room, and I do that, I'm free. Right? If I wish to walk down the street, I am free. And the reason why Hobbes says the situation promotes liberty is because now we're free, we're safe. We can walk outside. We can go do things. Right? We're free from the threat of our neighbors. And so people will more willingly and ably go outside. Right? Act, walk around, do things. Okay? And the sovereign decides war and peace, goodness and bad, just and unjust, determines the religion of the state, what the religion teaches. There's all sorts of things. Okay. The sovereign is also obliged from this contract to protect the people. Right. So as long as the sovereign is physically protecting you from external harm, from invaders, the sovereign is fulfilling the social contract, and therefore you are obliged to fulfill the social contract. Okay. Is that the right way to think about security? Is that the right way to avoid upheavals and rebellions and produce a safe society? That's up for you to decide. All right, that's all I've got for Hobbes.